continuing our course of noology, and today the fifth lecture is dedicated to the Logos of Dionysus. Now, in the geosophy perspective, we understand better what means the Logos of Apollo and the Logos of Cybele in a concrete sense, and the sense of the cultures and existential horizons. So now we are going to speak not about in the general of Logos of Dionysus, but in a concrete ethno-sociological, historical, and as well sociological and economical sense. So we have fixed the very important moment in the European history that defined the main structure of European noomaqua, European historical sequence, the sequence of the event. So the key to interpret European history in its ontological and existential dimension is to follow and observe how this process of noomaqua, or how this interaction between two opposite existential horizons developed itself through the historical epochs and eras and cycles. So that we already have a kind of grille de lecture, reading system of interpretation, hermeneutic of European history, because as we have seen, it is based on the mutual reinterpretation of the same symbolic and mythological structure, religious structure, cultural structures, from two perspectives, two contrary perspectives. So that is noomaqua in the purest sense. The Logos of Cybele tries to reinterpret the same figure or impose its own figure in the context of the mixed culture, mixed civilization. And that is a kind of, we could call it the fight for the gender of the deity, of the divinity, because divinity could be interpreted in the materialistic Cybelean way perspective, or spiritualistic and patriarchal, heavenly vertical Indo-European in its original sense way. And we have a kind of intersection between, that is, if the battlefields of the European history. There is the battlefield between two logos. And battlefield demands encounter, meeting point between two existential space. And this battlefield creates a kind of new structure, third structure. Because in purest sense, Logos of Apollo is represented by Turanian society, nomadic. In purest sense, the Logos of Cybele is represented by agrarian, matriarchal, sedentary society. But there is new dimension that is created. That is precisely the field or the space of Dionysus, where the patriarchal concept of the man is descending into the depth of the matter. That belongs to the sky comes to the earth and comes into the center of the earth, into the center of underground. So Dionysus became a king of the hell, of underground. as Zagreus in Greek myth. So there is a kind of differentiation of this Apollonian structure. The pure Apollon, the pure Apollo, pure Apollo, it has no direct contact with the matter of the Logos of Cybele. He stays outside. He is absolutely untouched. He belongs to the sky, to the day, to the light. He has no contact. He's pure. And the Apollo's order is the order of the fathers, of the purity, of the logos, of the logical, of the metaphysical strictness. And there is the law of the heaven, of Platonic ideas, of the lights, of the stars. But when the sun of the sky comes to the earth, there begins new dimension. And this dimension is the dimension or level of the Dionysus. So there is completely new field of the reality, a new logos is appearing. It could be regarded as a kind of result of the encounter, of meeting, or the battleground between the logos. But little by little, it could be as well regarded as something autonomous, that not is the product of the encounter of two opposite logos, but the third logos as such. We see that not in the European history, but we see that in the other cultures. For example, in Chinese culture or in the pygmies in the Africa. Chinese and pygmies have the Dionysian society in the purest sense, with not as result of something, of some superposition of two existential horizons, but something original, autonomous. So we should preserve in this logos, why we are speaking about three logos and not about two, because there is possibility in some societies, not in the Indo-European, sedentary or nomadic, but in other society, we have the structures based fully on the absolute domination of this Dionysian logos. But in the case of Indo-European culture, there is always battlefield. So Dionysus is battlefield. In other societies, not necessarily. So that we need to take that in account, in consideration, in order to understand better what is the logos of Dionysus. But in the Indo-European society, we are dealing precisely with the war between the logos of Apollo and logos of Cybele. In the ethno-sociological sense, it is translated by the fundamental events and processes that were developing in the field of the third Indo-European function, where was the synthesis between third function, pastoralist, and Kettler's function of the Turanian, pure Indo-European existential horizon, and sedentary, agricultural, matriarchal society. In this segment of the society, in the peasantry, in the European peasantry, was the special space of the Dionysus. There is the field and the kingdom of Dionysus. It is the kingdom of the agriculture. So Dionysus is the god of agriculture, and he is the god of wine, but as well he is the god of the sacrifice of the bull, of coal, and in the mysteries, and above all in the Eleusis mystery, he is always accompanied by Demeter, the new figure, Demeter. Dionysus and Demeter, they are both the deities and the figures of the agriculture. And that is very important pair, very important duality between Dionysus and Demeter, who plays the central roles in the Eleusis mysteries. Eleusis mystery was the mystery of the wine and the bread. Wine grape represented by Dionysus, and the sprout of the wheat represented by Demeter. This pair of the mother and heavenly son and patriarchal seed, not created from her, but put in her, in the center of the earth, in order to resurrect, in order to revive, to be revived, in order to come back. That was completely new version of agriculture, patriarchal understanding or interpretation of agriculture. So Demeter is not the same as the Cybele. It is completely different understanding of what is Mother Earth. That is the concept of the patriarchal interpretation of Mother Earth. The Mother Earth that is seen from above and not from inner side. It is epictonic and not epochtonic deity. Epictonic, that is above the surface of the earth. So that is the field. Demeter is the mother of fields, labored, prepared, and directed to the sky, and open to the sky, and open to the influences of the sky. That is the figure of the Great Mother recognizing transcendentality, the transcendent principle of the heaven and the Father, and submitted, domesticated mother. Demeter is the mother in the patriarchal sense, embedded in the patriarchal society and accepted under such condition precisely as agriculture. There is the shift from Cybele to the Demeter, very important shift. The shift from savage mother and domesticated mother. The mother creating autonomously the world, and mother as a helper to the seed, to the father's seed to grow. That is different concept of the feminine principle of woman that is here in act. So Dionysus is pair, he is son, and he is lover, and he is husband, and he as well is father of Demeter. So it is completely new relations. And here we see in that pair in the Eleusis mystery of Greece, of the Thracian region, and I will explain why the Thracian region is so important. And Thracia partly covered as well the Serbian territory, partly. So that is very important. So this Eleusis mystery was mystery of the shift from purely Cybelean existential space in the peasantry into the patriarchal Demetric space of the mixed Indo-European agrarian society. And there appears Dionysus as new figure, completely new figure. It is not Apollo, but that is not Attis from Cybelean cycle. It is new figure of immanent transcendence, something that is coming from the sky in order to go to the center of the earth and after that save the earth from its chaotic or gravity or this Cybelean aspect. That is purification of the earth by the wine. And the mystery of wine, it is a kind, the mystery of blood of God that has descended into the center of the earth in order to save the world, the matter itself. So the wine, it is Dionysus as a kind of freedom from the Great Mother. So the freedom is possible. The Dionysus is the sign of the freedom. So return is possible. The freedom is possible. The flight is possible. We could die, but we should arise with Dionysus. So that is very important transcendental dimension installed in the context of the agrarian, sedentary, matriarchal society or existential horizon. There is very important aspect in the cycle of the myths and rites around Dionysus. There were bacchantes groups of women, followers of Dionysus. And there was a moment when bacchantes heard the call of Dionysus. It's very important things. That was a kind of voice, silent voice that only initiated bacchant women could hear. And that was a kind of call to go to the heights, to the mountains. And the bacchant, hearing the call of the Dionysus, they became mad and crazy, and they went through the fields and the forests as crazy, tearing apart everything they encountered on their way in order to get to the height, to the cave of Dionysus, because that was the call that Dionysus is born, is alive. And that this crazy state of mind was very similar to the matriarchal orgy, but with very important difference. That was appearance of transcendental male figure. That was the feeling, the profound feeling of the existence or arrival of the savior, male savior. That was not autonomous creation of female androgyne Agditas, as in the cycle of Cybele. That was a kind of appearance of transcendental seed that was not the path of the Great Mother. And that was madness, female madness encountering with the real transcendental male figure, completely different from the previous orgiastic tradition. And that was encounter with this transcendental vertical aspect was the essence of this call of Dionysus. So but that is very interesting that in Indo-European tradition we never see Dionysus in the pure state. It is always Dionysus as brother of Apollo, as bearer of light. So we interpret the figure of Dionysus and Logos of Dionysus in Apollonian perspective. And we have no other Dionysus. That is only one Dionysus in our tradition. It is Dionysus of the Indo-European existential horizon. But there is always possibility to reinterpret this figure in the perspective of Cybele. Cybele tries to regard this coming of the male figure, of the transcendental patriarchal figure in its ancient matriarchal Cybelean perspective. And to replace the Dionysus by Dionysus. Dionysus that was as well the figure of the male of the matriarchal cycle, by Attis. And that easy change of the slight change of the meaning turned everything upside down. So that is why the Dionysus was and is battlefield between two logos in Indo-European context. Indo-European reading of Dionysus was Apollonian, but they operated in a very dangerous space where the power of the Great Mother and its interpretations, its hermeneutics, were the power was very strong. So and that is as well one of the reasons why there was no special rites and myth dedicated exclusively to Dionysus, and the majority of the rites, procession, myth, the figures of Dionysus were taken from the special worship practices of Great Mother, and that is fully described in two books that I suggest you to read. It is the book of Karl Kerényi, Dionysus, Unending Limitless Life, Dionysus, the absolute limitless life, and Dionysm and pre-Dionysm of Vyacheslav Ivanov, that is in Russian language. So that is interesting. When Karl Kerényi, Hungarian author and friend of Mircea Eliade, very interesting, very profound author, tried to reveal the sources of the cult of Dionysus, he came to the conclusion that there was, before the figure of Dionysus, something very near, very close to him, but in completely different context. That was purely matriarchal cult with almost the same processions, almost the same rites of the cave, of the bacchantes, of the madness, of the orgies, but totally matriarchal. So that is the most important, most interesting point, that in the field of the rites and the cults and the legends and the myths of Dionysus in the origin were matriarchal tradition, transformed by coming of new existential horizon of Indo-European horizon. So Dionysus cult, the cult of Dionysus and the Logos of Dionysus was the Logos of the or the structure of the cult of the Great Mother transformed by the descent of the transcendental patriarchal principle. So all the symbols of Dionysus were pre-Dionysian, were matriarchal. So he was, or sometimes he appeared as the serpent. Sometimes he appeared surrounded by the figures of the half-man satyrs, half-beasts. They were normally the partner of the Great Mother. And these processions of Dionysus were as well continuation of the processions of the Great Mother, with the same rites, with the symbolism, and the symbolism of pine linked with Dionysus was the symbolism of the Great Mother as well. So that is interesting, that was a kind of conquest of the territory of the myth by Indo-Europeans. Conquest and inner semantical transformation. So the Indo-Europeans have conquered not only physical space or villages or peoples, they conquered the space of myth. They conquered as well worship practices, and they transformed semantically the figure of Cybele, surrounded by all the symbols and all the signs and all the practices of worship and the cult, into the figure of Demeter and Dionysus. This transformation was as well a kind of conquest. So they were conquerors in the European that have appropriated the space that didn't belong to them, because in Turanian way of life they didn't know such things. They have taken that, they have conquered that, and they have imposed their reading. So that was a kind of attack on the new field by Indo-European civilization. So, in the metaphysical sense, in the Neoplatonist tradition, Dionysus was presented as a mind. The main myth of Dionysus was the myth how the Titans have turned Dionysus apart. The little Dionysus, the child Dionysus playing on the Olymp was attacked and torn apart and eaten by Titans that have intervened in the Olympus in order to kill Dionysus. And Neoplatonic interpretation of Dionysus is a mind that is present in any human, but as a kind of spark of Dionysus, because in Orphic interpretation, a Neoplatonic interpretation of the human nature is double. On one side, it is titanic by the body, by the material aspect, and on the other side, it is Dionysian, and that is human soul, human mind, human thought is Dionysian. And Dionysus is turned apart as a spiritual, intellectual principle presented in the multitude, but being unified, unique in its core. That's the concept of immanent intellect, Dionysus, not the paradigm of intellect in the Father, but that is a kind of Son of God present in the human nature and opposite to the other side of this nature, that is titanic. That's just precisely the problem of metaphysics of Dionysus and the metaphysics of human culture. That is double human culture, because it consists from two horizons. There is titanic horizon, that is not the body as such, not the matter. That is the Cybelean reading of what is body. So that is NOOMAQUIA. Dionysus is the man. Dionysus is the other name for the human being as cultural being in the context of superposition of two existential horizons. So that is the problem of all Indo-European society, the problem of Dionysus, and Dionysus as battlefield between the patriarchy and matriarchy, embedded in our culture, that is precisely the problem of Dionysus, is the problem of Indo-European culture and key to noomaqua of Indo-European society. From the Western Europe or from in the Western Europe or in the Asia, because in Iran and in India there is exactly the same structure of the cultural problem. There is no such figure as Dionysus in Indian culture, but there is Shiva. That's the paradoxal figure. There is there is no direct equivalence, but there is always this battleground, this battlefield between two logoses. And what is interesting that in Indo-European societies, this logos of Dionysus is unstable. That's very important. Is unstable. There are the other culture I have mentioned already, Chinese and Pygmalion, and maybe up to the certain point the culture of Aztecs in the New World, in America, South America, and Central America, with Quetzalcoatl figure. Quetzalcoatl, that is more or less the combined figure between two, that was the winged serpent. But in the European society, the figure of Dionysus and field of Dionysus is unstable because it is very antagonistic, that is conflictual. There is the conflict between mind and body, between this, not because of the nature of mind and body, but because of the reading of the nature of mind and body. So mind, as we consider it, is something that belongs to Logos of Apollo and its immanent representation in Dionysus. And our body is read, not is the part of the Logos of Cybele, is read as something material, something that weighs, something with gravity. That is not necessary. There are the other cultures, for example, that have completely different concept of body, with no materiality inside. But our problem, in the European problem, with the weight of the body, of materiality of body, it is the trace of the Logos of Cybele and not the nature, objective nature of the body. Everything we are dealing with are the projections of these paradigms. So existential horizon of Cybele dictates the quality of our body, or something that is gravity, that is a limitation of the self. It is not natural, it is cultural construction, our concept of mind, body, and so on. But what is important, it is that the figure of Dionysus in our cultures is unstable. So it is always the center of the Logos of Dionysus in our culture is always shifted or to the Apollonian Logos, that is the normal situation. So we don't know Dionysus as such. In the European, in the Europeans know Dionysus in Apollonian perspective, as the brother of Apollo, not as such. So the center of Dionysian understanding of world is shifted to the top. It belongs to the Apollonian universe that dominates in Indo-European cultures. So the Logos of Dionysus is normally a kind of continuation or immanentization, immanent dimension of the Logos of Apollo. And that is a classical or normative case of Indo-European civilization.
Ako može, izvinite, mislim da veliki uticaj u ponašanju Logosa ima i, sad ne bi mogao reći, čistina Cybele.
The great influence on the behaving or functioning of Logos has the purity of Cybele.
Sad ne bi mogao reći čistina, jer ja bih pre rekao,
Purity, but
sad živimo u kvantnom svetu i sad to je sve frekvencija. Onda frekvencija, koja je frekvencija Cybele, koja utiče da li će se više razvijati Dionys ili Apollon?
What is the frequency of Cybele?
So, in order to understand better what is Cybele, we could not compare that with something material, with, for example, the waves or frequencies. We are dealing with Logos, so we are dealing not with the same matter, with different gravity or different density. We are dealing with completely different understanding of everything. So we could not regard the Cybele as something that is outside of us, object or matter, or vibrations or frequencies, or purity or the dirtiness. The Cybele is a kind of vision of the world. So there is the special, for example, if we are speaking about matter or elements, there we could suggest three reading of that. So the main idea of noology, there's the Logos of Cybele, Logos of Dionysus, and Logos of Apollo, are deep inside of any form of thought. So they are inside of thought, not in front of thought. So they are the paradigms that is very difficult to grasp, to seize, to understand, because they are dealing behind our mind, defining its structure. So we could not see that Cybele as image that is in front of us, or Apollo, or Dionysus. When we are speaking about the Logos, we are speaking about something that is deep behind our fluid of consciousness, that defines the roots of our mentality. So we could not speak about that pure or impure, of high frequency or low frequency, just because it is not the matter. It is not the way. We could not put it in front of us. But in order to proceed with Logos of Dionysus, we need to understand the problematic nature of Dionysus in our culture. It is not the universal law or rule. In our culture, it is shifted to the top. So it is not pure Logos of Dionysus. It is Apollonian, the Dionysian Logos we are dealing with. But being the battlefield and being precisely the intermediary space, there is always the possibility of opposite reading. So, and through the books and through studies of NOOMAQUIA, in my books, I have discovered that that is maybe the main problem, metaphysical problem of all Indo-European cultures and the history. So that is a kind of the structure of moment or sequence of noomaqua. So it is a key to our historical being, as historical beings. That the key to understand what we are and what is our history, because there is always, and there was always, the effort of something inside us to put this center of the Logos of Dionysus to the other direction, and regards it as something that lays beneath this line that separates, distinguishes Logos of Apollo and Logos of Cybele. So, and I have called that is kind of presumption, black double of Dionysus. So, or Adonisus or Attis, not as Dionysus we know in our normative Indo-European tradition, but a kind of the product of Cybelean reinterpretation of Dionysus, and that is precisely the Titan, the figure of Lucifer, or the Titan of Prometheus, or someone that is very, very close to Dionysus. We could consider that, but it is a kind of his black double. He is, there is a German word, the twin of Dionysus, Dunkelzwillinge, the black double. And this figure is very close to the figure of Dionysus. It is not normative, it is considered to be completely opposite to our world vision, but it is always present as a shadow of Dionysus, but not the shadow in the simply material way. It is metaphysical shadow that is maybe more ancient than that Dionysus, because it belongs to the Great Mother Cosmos. And we could consider, because Dionysus, it is always mystery as dynamic, something dynamic. It is not only the eternal light that shines always, the day. That is the light that becomes darkness, that fades, that disappears and shines anew. So there is dynamic, the mystery as dynamic, the mystery of seed. The seed dies and is resurrected as a sprout of wheat or a plant. And what is important? We could consider that a kind of cycle. The cycle of something that belongs to the top, essentially, goes down in the center of the night, darkness and the earth. And after that, it resurrects in return to its original place on the top of the creation. That's the full cycle of the sun, of year. But we could consider almost the same, starting from the other point. There is something that belongs to the bottom, that is created by Great Mother. And it arises, storming the heaven, in order to bring down the gods and to replace them. That is a kind of rise of this titanic Prometheus element to dethrone the gods, but there is the fate of Titans, fall down as the Prometheus. So he could trick the gods. The Titan can win the god for time being, as for example Theseus that has overcome Zeus in Greek mythology. But the fate of Titan is to fall down. And if we represent this cycle, is almost the same as in the case of Dionysus, because something is rising, something achieves the highest point, and after that something falls. So if we consider that in the main feature, that is almost the same scenario, almost the same tale. But first tale begins from the sky to the earth and return to the sky. The other tale begins from the earth, it is conquest of the heaven, and the fall of angels, the fall of Titans, the fall of Prometheus and the Tartar, or Titans. They are climbing to the top of Olympus. They tear apart Dionysus there, and they are blamed, and they are stricken by the Zeus, and with his bolts, and they fall, destroyed, totally destroyed, and go to the Tartars. So there is a kind of noomaqua that we could read normally from both sides. And that is important, that there is a kind of symmetry. So Logos of Apollo and the Logos of Cybele agree about the main structure of this titanomachia, but they read this process, the same tale, from two opposite point of view, two perspectives. So what is a conscious decision of Dionysus to come down to the center of the hell in order to save her mother and Cybele and bring her back to the Olympus? That is one cycle. And if we read that from other angle, we have Titan born by the great mother attacking the gods, dethroning and the gods from the heaven and the sky and their kingdom. And after that there is revenge of the fate, of the destiny, and they fall down to the same point from where they have appeared. So the same tale to reading. That gives the problem of black double of Dionysus all its metaphysical measure, because dealing with the cycle, with the logic of the year, of the sun, of the cycle of any kind, we are dealing always with two possibilities of reading, with two semantic structures of how to interpret that. And so when Dionysus arrives in the mixed society where there are superposition of two existential horizons, there begins the open problem of the nature of Dionysus. So the nature of Dionysus in our tradition is absolutely unstable. It is dynamic. It is contradictory. It is dialectic. And that is not only one way, one version to interpret this dialectic. That is, there are two versions. So there is Dionysian can be at the same time the almost simulacrum of Dionysus, of Dionysian. That could be Adonisian at the same time as Dionysian. that could be pre-Dionysian and Dionysian at the same time. So the problem of the European civilization, it is the problem of Dionysus. So it is not something that is given to us as something granted. It is open question, and we could not solve it abstractly, because we are this process. As Neoplatonicists have said, that Dionysus is our mind. So our mind, and that's vision, has its own double, black double inside of it. So our mind, our soul, our spirit is double in its nature, being Dionysian. It is splitting. It is dealing always with something that is opposed in itself to its inner self. So there is simulacrum problem that is embedded in the Indo-European mind, because Indo-European mind is double and is based precisely on the superposition of two existential horizons. And we could not be sure where we are Titans and when we are Dionysus, because both we are not dealing with something. For example, mind is Dionysian, the body is Titanic. There is as well Dionysian body and Titanic mind as well. So the body and mind are not so clearly separated. They are intermingled, because they, mind and body, are the products and projections of Logos, and not something that exists without Logos. In human world, nothing could exist without Logos. We have nothing, for sure. Everything we are dealing with are the product of projection, of perspective of this paradigmatic approach. So there is a kind of two bodies and two minds in us. There is spiritual body, the body of resurrection in Christian doctrine, and there is a material mind, Titanic mind, reason, mechanical reason, calculation. So we have as well material body and spiritual mind. So there is, and that is the problem of dialectic of our culture, because this double of Dionysus is not something that exists outside of our culture, but it exists inside our culture. If we consider now, that is the most important concept of the Logos of Dionysus. And that is why the figure of Dionysus was so important to discover in the case of Nietzsche, and develop the people and the philosophers that followed Nietzsche. Discover this problem, discover this dark Logos. It is discover the real problematic of European history, because we could not be sure we are dealing with Dionysus or with Dionysus, when we are dealing with the real mind or with a simulacrum of mind. When we and the Logos of Cybele now explain thoroughly and fully what we are dealing with. So that is the necessary dimension that explains everything in this problematic of Dionysus. But to reveal, to find out the Logos of Dionysus, as in case of Nietzsche, was already heroic act. That was metaphysical revolution that have discovered the key of problem of European or Indo-European, I would say, man. That is double of Dionysus, the possibility of Titanic reading of Dionysus explains why before noology, before introduction of Logos of Cybele, the Dionysus was mistakenly taken for Titan or some purely negative aspect of the light or white Logos of Apollo. So that is most important, I think, discovery, metaphysical discovery, because with introduction of Logos of Cybele, everything is put on its places. Now we see why there is some dialectical misinterpretation of Dionysus and its identification with the black perversion or something upside down. So and now we see, and the most important thing, it is instability of Dionysus. So the interpretation, or speaking with Paul Ricoeur, the conflict of interpretation is open. We are dealing with two hermeneutic space embedded in the figure of Dionysus, and there is always possible a kind of replacement, of tricks, of special metaphysical perversion or deviation of the semantic structure linked to Logos of Dionysus. I would like to add, in order to make a kind of example of this Dionysian approach, and to understand better maybe and deeper what is the Logos of Dionysus, I would like to say some words about Gilbert Durand. That is very important author, Gilbert Durand, French. He is dead recently, at very old age. Gilbert Durand, he has created sociology of imagination. Sociology of imagination, that is excellent. I made my doctorate, the third doctorate on it, on sociology of imagination. He is a follower of Carl Gustav Jung, Henri Corbin and Gaston Bachelard. But he has developed a very original version of the structure of imagination. According to Gilbert Durand, man is imagination. So we have nothing but imagination. We are nothing but imagination. There is everything we are dealing with imagined structure. And he studied the roots of the imagination, how imagination works in us, because it is not reflection of the existing project or object, quite contrary. The objects are the products of our imagination. First we imagine something, and after we are dealing with what we have imagined previously. That is almost the same as phenomenology. I have already mentioned Husserl, Edmund Husserl, and his concept of intentionality. According to Husserl, intentional act is the act directed towards something that exists outside of our mind, but that has no quality in it. So any quality we are dealing with are inside our mind. So Husserl calls that noema. The process of intentional act is noesis, and noema is something that is thought of. So we are dealing with the qualities of the objects that are inherent to our process of the thought and not exterior of it. So that is phenomenology. Heidegger is continuation of this phenomenological tradition as many other. But Gilbert Durand, proposes different way to this phenomenological approach, and he speaks about the regimes of imagination. So that is very important. He affirms, Gilbert Durand, that our imagination works in three regimes, and that is very close, very close to concept of three logos. Now we are going to see how. So, regime of imagination, it is a kind of inner state of the structure of human mind that creates different sequences of basic principal images, symbols, and the structure. According to Gilbert Durand, there are three regimes. First, it is diurn. Diurn, it is the regime of day. So that is regime of light that is based on the concept of the strict duality. So there is strict and absolute differences. So when we divide, separate, regime of diurn separates, not unites, separates, only separates. It is everything is clear as in the daylight, and this regime as well is regime of vertical organization of the space. It is linked, according to Durand, with the postural reflex of the child. When the child begins to stay in a vertical position, it is considered by imagination as a flight. He is a kind of arrow that is going to the heaven. That is the flight. When verticality is strictly connected with this regime of diurn. That is heroic, warrior, male, patriarchal regime. So what we have said about the Logos of Apollo could be easily applied to the regime of imagination that is called diurn. That is vertical orientation of everything, and according to Durand, the regime of diurn, that is a Latin word for daily, diurn. It is the fight against the night, against the death, against the darkness. So that is a kind of conflictual Apollonian war, the light of war, that is continuing always. So in the field of mental illness, it corresponds to paranoia. Paranoia is absolutization of this diurn. So that is everything is separates up to the atomic quantities, and there is always consolidation of the subject and destruction of the object. So that is warrior. Warrior is always fighting, is always fighting. So he destroys with the sword everything, and the sword is diurn. The sword is something that separates, that's not kills but separates, mutilate, put aside, put apart. So that is consolidation of the subject and destruction of the object. That is a regime of diurn, and that is very Apollonian and Indo-European. According to Durand, Logos is born from this regime. So our thought is based on the development of this kind of imagination. We imagine the things separately. We separate the things and the objects, and we consolidate our subject by this. Everybody is against us, but we are winners of everybody. So that is the creation of hierarchy, of verticality, with the most paranoid subject at the top of the society, the Tsar, the king, that destroys everything and consolidates himself. So the paranoia is the purely the illness of the kings, because everybody is against them, everybody is planning to overthrow them, and that is the case sometimes, but they go straight to the final fight with the death and with the darkness, because around the king is surrounded by the shadows, by darkness, and his destiny is to fight against them, to start the war, to win the war, to kill the enemies and destroy everything, and consolidate everything inside and destroy everything outside. That is normal warrior attitude. And that is based on our reason is working in this regime. So our reason differentiates. The main practice of the reason is to differentiate. That is not so. That is here, there. That is one thing. That is other thing. And negation is as well very dual in its because negation, it is separation. What is, what doesn't is not, doesn't exist. What exists, what doesn't exist, and so on. So any kind of pairs, but our process of our thinking is based on that and that, duality, the pairs, separations, and that is exists or doesn't exist. That is how our reason proceeds. But according to Duran, is no more than one of the regime of imagination. There are two other. Both of them, they are called nocturne. Nocturne. First is dramatic nocturne, and the other mystical nocturne. So what is it? That is regime of functioning of our mind in completely different way. In the way not to separate, but to unite. Not to distinguish, but to put together. And it is not to separate something that's outside of us and consolidate something that is inside of us, as in case of the dual, but quite opposite. To unite everything that is around us and divide ourselves. That is purely schizophrenic attitude in the extreme case. So schizophrenia is separated inside, so there is the voices, the different egos inside, and there is the world around it that has reason, that is more powerful than the subject. So the world is united and strong, and the subject is weak and problematic and ill. So that is nocturnal regime, and that is based on the not on the logic but on the rhetoric and on the euphemism. That, for example, when it hurts, we say we are happy, we are satisfied. When we lack something, we consider that a kind of gift, that we lack something. So we are calling light, for example, darkness. We are afraid of the light. We something mild. So that is euphemization. So we call the things by completely different names, with opposite names, in order in order to avoid the horror that is embedded, because we are afraid of everything and of ourselves as well. We are not sure about our existence, so we are using the tactic of naming the things by the opposite names in order to avoid. For example, when women call the big husband with diminishing names as fish or sheep and so on, with great powerful masculine men, in order to diminish them, in order to make them a child, to make them innocent by this magic of regime, by regime of words. That is diminishing the proportion of the world, and as well treating something that menaces us, threatens us, as something very friendly. So that is not warrior concept, but pacifist consciousness. So be quiet, we have something in common, so you're not so horrible as you look out. So let's try to find the common denominator. So that is a kind of, in the extreme case, it is Stockholm syndrome. So you are taken as a hostage, and you come to the side of the terrorists. You divide, you share with them their position. Immediately you discover that they are right in their claims, because it's very difficult to stay this position of absolute domination of other. So you say they are not other. The Muslims are very good. The fundamentalists, the terrorists are nice guys. Let's stay with them. Let's stay with the evil, because it's not so evil. Let's stay with the death, because it's not the death, it's new beginning. Let's stay with the loss. It is a kind of gift. So that is regime. The other regime of imagination, according to Duran. It's very, very expressive and very interesting to follow many examples and symbols that Duran gave in his books and writings. It is very complicated theory. I'm explaining in the simplest version. But in the field of this nocturne regime of nocturne, there are two versions as well. The radical form of nocturne is mystical nocturne. It's called mystical nocturne by Duran. It is complete translation, complete exchange of the object and subject, myself and the other. So it is complete betrayal of the self. So everything is outside, inside is nothing, or just reflection of outside. So it is pure night. Night is the light, the bottom is top is bottom, and so on. Male is female is male, to die is to live is to die. So the pure antiphrase in rhetoric. So you are calling the things by the completely different name, by contradictory name, and you are happy with that. So that is mystical nocturne. That corresponds to the Logos of Cybele. That is the absolute domination of something created by self-betrayal. So the subject is not consolidated, it's completely dissipated in imagination. And the process of dissipation of mind creates the matter, a kind of matter or exterior world. The subject is weak, the matter is strong, but the matter doesn't exist. The matter is projection of this weakness of imagination. That's not something that exists independently. It begins to exist as if it is independently by the weakness of the subject. So that is the same imagination that could imagine the strong subject or weak subject. So that is inner move. So that is why it is so close to the concept of logos. and I'm using the concept of Gilbert Durand in my interpretation of different cultural and religious and historical phenomena. And there is the third regime, as well nocturne, as well the regime of night, but it is called dramatic nocturne in works of Durand. It is not radical ephemerization. It is more or less balanced ephemerization. So in this regime, we don't call night a day at night. We are calling them dawn. So there is not light, not darkness. There is the play. There is something intermediary. So we are in the dusk, in the shadow that is not the complete darkness. So that corresponds to regime or the Logos of Dionysus. And there is problematic, because it could be interpreted in the radicality as darkness that pretends to be light, or as light that is not too clear, for example. And there is the problematic of Dionysus that I have spoken. So this regime of dramatic nocturne is, if, for example, the regime of diurne is paranoid, a regime of mystical nocturne is schizophrenic, what is the mental disease that corresponds to the dramatic nocturne? That's normality. That's interesting. There is no mental disease. That is normality, because we are using, in normal situation, this dramatical nocturne, this Dionysian approach to the reality. Sometimes there is euphemisation, sometimes there is radical separation and differentiation. So we are using both strategy in the same time. So the problem in a psychological way, speaking about imagination and its anthropological structure, the problem of Dionysus is the structure of our imagination. We are imagining the world precisely in that way. If we consider that there is something material, we are approaching the mystical nocturne, but staying in the dramatical nocturne. But when we distinguish something clearly and separately, when there is a kind of reason functioning, so we are approaching the light pole of this Dionysian concept, but we are using both. The mental disease begins when it is too clear or too dark in our imagination, when we are attracted too much to one of these poles. That is example with sociology, and all the structure of the society could be Apollonian, or in this way diurne, that is hierarchy, rationality, law, and official relations, norms. And there is a night side of the society where all these laws are separated, where there are crimes, corruption, and domination of anything that is against law. So that is nocturnal aspect of the society that is presented inside of the society. So we could imagine the normal society, clear society, but as well we are imagining the dark society, night side of society, nightlife of society, and they are embedded in each other. So if there is law that rules, and the other there is crime that rules, but the crime for criminal is the law. So we have in Russia the robber in law, вор в законе. That is completely nocturnal. that means that there is some criminal group where the chief of this criminal group, but criminal is to be against the law, has all the right, has the law to be considered as some completely legitimate figure. So that is the robber in law, robber who makes robbery of banks or killings. Yes, so we have that a kind of the state against the state, or the chief of the leaders of the crime groups, but considered to be legal and legitimate. That is legitimation of the night side of the society. And sometimes they interact in very special way in Russian society. Now it's difficult to say when the day ends and where the night begins, because in our society they are intermingled, both aspects. But normally we understand that, for example, in Russia we have as well the saying, the pravda is not pravo. It's very difficult to say in English. So the law is not truth, maybe. So
Here.
so for Slavic, I think that. So if you go directly in the law way and accomplish all the demands, you can be not right. You can accomplish the bad. You can be evil, being completely strict in the following the law. Because the law and the truth are separate. It's impossible to explain to the Western European, because they could not understand the meaning of that. But that is the realistic understanding of the multitude of the regime of imagination that is proper to our Slavic culture and our society. We understand that there is the laws of the night and the laws of the day, and they are not, they work together. So it is the richness of the imagination. We could imagine at the same time contradictory thing. That is why we are Dionysian up to the certain moment. We could deal with dialectic, that's law, truth. We could imagine many theories on this account, but the main basical motivation of it, that is the richness of regimes of imagination. So I suggest, we could finish this explanation of Logos of Dionysus in all historical and existential analysis, adding one phrase, that Dionysus is Dasein as well. The Dionysus is in the center, it is between, not to the pole, and it has some affinities with what Gilbert Durand called dramatic nocturne. So that's all. Now I propose to make a break, and now the questions. And after we will have the 6th lecture about the structure of European civilization based on this noological analysis. Now, please.
Like the Dionysian style, can it be applied in the individual? I mean, culture is from individuals made.
Yes, for example, Dionysian style, it is that corresponds in the structure of society to the holidays of the peasants, not to the laws of the priests and warriors, but to the holiday of the peasants, when they not hard work, but the holiday. So it is something as art, is imagination, is a tale, storytelling, it's creation, it's ecstatic states, it's as well dances, erotical relations, all that's Dionysian. And the feeling of the life, because the life in the structure freezes in the state, for example, the bureaucracy, including in the army. It becomes too straight. There is no life, there is death, because the army is bringing death to the other and to warriors. But Dionysian is everything that is connected with that we are calling life. So we are calling, vice versa, we are calling life what is Dionysian. Well, that is the same from the other point. So when there is the freedom, when there is a kind of exaltation, ecstasis, the coming out from the norms in any sense, in positive and negative sense. So it is coming out to be too strong to be kept in some limits. So it is transgression, a kind of transgression to a kind of we call that Gumilev called Russian author passionarity. That the passion that could not be contained in the limits, that is too strong, that is that come out from the man. And for example, passionaries are the people who, for example, if normal people make labor one field, passionary could labor 100 fields at the same time, because it is a little bit crazy people that could not be satisfied with norms, as Genghis Khan or some of the creator of the great empire, because they are not satisfied with the normality, and that is something Dionysian, passionarity, so something that when the life overcome the natural borders. So that is sacredness, that is creation of the poetry, or the genius, or holiday, or just drinking wine, that is Dionysian, and dancing and fighting and quarreling, or say crying the words, or patriotic slogan. Everything is Dionysian. So that is a kind of the moments of life. They are not embedded strictly in the structure of the society. That is always exception, the state of emergence, of exception. They are Dionysian moments. There is something unplanned, something improvisable, something that we are coming from the normal ways, but that is as well very Slavic. We are always more or less Dionysian, so that is why so much alcoholism is in our society. So we are trying to find more and more Dionysian moments than Apollonian, for example. Science, logic, it's not so much Slavic. But at the same time, what is important that inside of this Dionysian space, there is the black double of Dionysus. There is we are solving in that way, in the Dionysian way, solving the main cultural problem, because this space is problematic, and we could easily fall in the Cybelean space. There is the difference between vodka and wine. Wine is Dionysian and vodka is Demetrian, much more feminist. So wine is male and vodka is much more female. So there are two kinds of drunkenness. Dionysian, male with the heroic acts, with trying to fight with each other, or to do something great, at least subjectively great. But and there is the other way to fall asleep, to lose any kind of capacity to move. That is the other nocturne side of the holiday. So there is a moment as well. The art is completely useless. So we are regarding the work of art for nothing. It's simply joy, it's simply freedom, it's simply Dionysian moment, or saying the poetry. So that is very special aspect. When the state, when the society try to limit, to control that, the lives run out. So that should be a little bit spontaneous. Dionysian. It could not be planned. So that is the spontaneous, as the call of Dionysus, that bacchant heard. So something that comes from inside.
Society always with drink noomaqua for Dionysus. Primary noomaqua coming new experience drink.
Yes. We could read noomaqua, drinking and understand, but that will be reading noomaqua through the eyes of Dionysus. There are the other.
Professor, does Orthodox dogma stabilize the Logos of Dionysus?
Very interesting, very important question. I would not respond it because tomorrow we will have the lecture about Christianity and how a noological interpretation of Christianity, and because it demands development, that's very important question. I will respond this question tomorrow during this lecture, or if there will be something not clear, I will respond that tomorrow.
So just a quick question. You said here that Western Europeans don't understand when you say that there's a difference between justice and law, and we Slavic people understand this perfectly, because you have these criminal structures which operate on their own principles, etc. But now, if anyone here has seen Sopranos, you can see that Italians have the same vision of the world. You have the Italian mafia, which operates as a structure with the Dionysian logic. You have the capo tutti capi, which can...
Sibelian, much more Sibelian.
Much more Sibelian. So, but they still have this undercurrent of society, which functions as a hierarchy, and these two mesh together. So, in this sense, is this a difference between Western Europeans and Slavic nations, or between Catholics and Orthodox on one hand and Protestants on the other? So, what's the
very nice question as well. There are. Partly I will respond tomorrow, but there is clear affinity between Italian psychology and society or Slavic society. It is obvious, almost obvious. Yeah. It has to do with Catholicism against Protestantism in the new time, in new period of history. It could be as well, could be something that has to do with South, because in South there's Dionysian field of culture, not so cold. It's much more Mediterranean in Balkans. For example, I was in the monastery. I don't drink. I was in monastery in Valdai, not in Valdai, in Valam, in the north of Russia, with my friends, and they drink. My friends, and that was the monks were there, and there was Macedonian monk. Methodi. Yes, Methodi. And he invited everybody to drink. And that was difference between southern Slavs and us, Eastern Slavs. The Methodios, Father Methodios, drank during 12 hours, any 30 seconds, one glass of wine, whiskey, vodka, everything, and rakia. After that, he made with rakia he washed his hands and drank more and more, and he was joyful, clear, very happy, very open, and very transparent, with no weight. So that was purely Dionysian monk who more he drank, more clear. I had experience. Maybe he will rise now, because every but that was a huge amount of alcohol, huge. That was amazing, and he was not so big. He was Macedonian, very open, very hard, with open heart. He didn't fall in the negative aspect. He said the tales, the Christian, the normal, but he, without stopping, drank and drank, and there was one of the men that was in the fight, Igor Strelkov, with us in the Donbass. He came later, after 6 hours of this session of Father Methodios. He stayed after he came from the front, and he's strong man, strong guy. He stayed 1 hour. After that, he was taken aside completely in the coma state, and Father Methodios continued. And there was the other my friend, that's very big, very with a smart, very strong, powerful guy, one of Russian Orthodox oligarch, very good friend of mine, but he's really great. So he can drink much more than he was, thrice more than Father Methodios, but he was Russian, and the alcohol worked on him in the Demetrian, not Dionysian way. He, little by little, he stayed up to the end, to the end that was, and Father Methodios went to the church and served there, and accepted the confessions and participated as if nothing. So that is the miracle for me. That was spiritual miracle. How transformed. That was purely Dionysian form. How transformed the wine in the spirit with no shadow. And every Russian that participated that were completely destroyed for 2 or 3 days afterward as well. So that was killing everybody except Father Methodios. And that is, I think, something that has to do with Dionysian Southern Slav tradition. And I have remarked that in Moldova as well, they drink very much, but they don't fall. They continue to be joyful and Dionysian. And Russian, we have depression, our Slavic nostalgia, and there is more and more Demetrian, I would say, in a nocturnal way. So, and finally we are falling, and we feel nothing. It's a kind of coma, Demetrian, where we are taken by a Cybelean spirit down to the earth, and the Slavic Balkan monk was almost flying in that situation. So there are two that's just a remark or experience in Valam monastery.
Genetic.
I don't know, spiritual, I think, the cultural.